Yes. Thank you for returning for part 3 of my Buck series. So, before I mentioned that Sergeant Buck was stationed at Camp Lyon, but what was Camp Lyon? Camp Lyon, with a Y, remember, was a fort on the southern outskirts of Alexandria, Virginia, the primary purpose of which was guarding a 3/4-mile-long chain bridge to D.C. It was an important post, and both the 3rd Vermont and 6th Maine regiments were stationed there simultaneously. The men were a bit nervous, as Erastus wrote, quote, "Within 12 miles of here, there are 15,000 rebels. We expect an attack every day." Perhaps nervous isn't the right word. It's not like they were hiding behind their earthen walls, just waiting for an attack, praying every day it won't come. There were scouting parties that went out, and in fact, Erastus took part in a few of them. He also writes, quote, "We have been on 2 scouting parties and took 3 rebels and 7 horses." So that's something. Erastus has now seen the enemy. Erastus also writes of the other men from Charleston, those men being Richard W. Gray, Joseph B. Grow, and the brothers Horace and Lucius E. Briggs. He says that they're all in good spirits and ready for the fight. Erastus closes by warning that he may not be able to write as often as he is busy with camp duties. He does, however, wish his wife and children well and asks for a reply as soon as possible. This letter, pretty open and shut, pretty short letter. In the letter, he describes what I said about the positioning. He wasn't as clear in the positioning as I was. I did some private research, but the main purpose of them being there was to guard the chain bridge. But that's the end of letter 2, on to letter 3. Erastus writes this next letter a month later and opens it with major passive aggression, complaining that Martha isn't writing him enough, saying, quote, "I don't know why my letters don't come so quick and direct as the others. Perhaps they are not written, but it seems to me that you could not fail to write." He goes on to explain that as he is on duty all the time, he can't write until after 10 p.m. And he, in fact, gives Martha an out by saying maybe his letters are slow to arrive and that she's not replying because she has nothing to reply to. And so he gives her the out of, well, maybe you're waiting to hear from me first. He then goes on to little push it a bit by saying, but if I followed the same rule of not writing until I had something to reply to, you wouldn't be getting this letter because I'm not replying to one of yours, am I? So a little bit of, trying to little needle her into replying more, but I don't know. It comes off as a bit whiny to me, like, oh, why aren't you writing more? But that could just be my interpretation. So with the guilt trip out of the way, Erastus gets to some excitement. He describes his part in the Bailey's Crossroads skirmish, which I'm sure you've heard of. You haven't heard of the Bailey's Crossroads skirmish? Come on, guys. It's a major turning point. Okay. So in this next part, I'm going to be including information not in the letter because it wasn't known to him at the time, but I'm going to flesh out the skirmish a bit more. So not everything I'm describing next is in the book. Don't expect to read as in-depth as I'm going in the book, because the book is primarily just the letters with a little bit of context. I added far more, and you'll see later how it got confusing with the context I added because of some names that I thought might have just been misdone. So, back to his part in the skirmish. So, just after nightfall, August 27th, a small Confederate force of 6 companies, 3 of cavalry, 3 of infantry, along with 2 light cannon, make a reconnaissance in force to Ball's Crossroads at about 10 p.m. The alarm is sounded at Camp Lyon with the beating of the long roll and the firing of 3 cannon. Company D falls into line with their bedrolls on their backs and 20 cartridges on their side. The whole regiment marches double quick a mile to their pre-dug rifle pits. This is outside of the camp, as they were expecting a further attack, but none comes. After waiting an hour, the entirety of the 3rd Vermont Infantry Regiment marches back to Camp Lyon, where each man is given an additional 20 rounds, along with a full day's field rations to put in their knapsacks. They are ordered to sleep under arms. They do sleep and experience no farther excitement until the next morning. And now I'm going to go into the part that Buck didn't really know about. So, while the 3rd Vermont Regiment waits around camp, the 23rd New York is on the move. They drive the Confederates 3 miles past Ball's Crossroads to Bailey's Crossroads. This, by the way, is where I said I had to triple check because I thought maybe Erastus just misheard Ball's or Bailey's. But no, 2 separate crossroads, 3 miles away from each other, both involved in the Bailey's Crossroads skirmish. So they were driven to there, then a mile and a half past that, where the pursuit was halted as the rebels had the high ground, and they dug entrenchments and placed a cannon on said eminence. Minimal casualties were taken on both sides. The next day, however, after a dozen rounds were fired from the Union side with no Confederate return fire, some Michigan men stormed the rebel works to find that they were abandoned and that the cannon that had caused such hesitation was in fact an old stovepipe. That's right, it was a Quaker gun. Erastus closes with some news of the boys from home, and he also inquires about how the crops are doing. This could bring us on to letter 4, however, I think I'm going to end this video now. I know this installment's a bit shorter, but I wanted to, space it out well and get the pacing right. Anyway, I'm going to go back to research and see you next time when we get to his first real skirmish.